cannot start an award without me showing you one of my favorite pins of the year. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. I am wrapping up 2020. Thank you whether stayed with me throughout 2020, or if you're new, thank you for being here. I also wish that all of you that are watching these are healthy and that your loved ones are healthy. It's been a long, difficult year for everybody. And let's get into a bit of statistics of what I've read. And I also decided to do basically the book Oscars this year. Instead of going through my favorite or least favorite books, I decided to cover those with just categories like we were at the Oscars. You'll see that in a second. But first of all, some statistics, because people love statistics. I love statistics. Well, only when they're regarding books. Otherwise, I hate statistics. First of all, I have to admit that for the first time since I've downloaded and used Goodreads, I failed my reading challenge. I had set up myself to read 100 books. I ended up reading 59 books. 41 were physical books and 18 were audiobooks of those. Unfortunately, with how busy I was, it was just really difficult for me. I moved house and all of that, so that definitely had an impact on me not being able to reach my Goodreads challenge goal. I also read 36 graphic novels and mangas, which again are not as many as I wish there were, but not too bad. I think I read many in the first part of the year, and then I kind of didn't read basically much for the rest of the year, but hopefully again I can get back to them. Consider that they're really expensive, so I was able to acquire less than usual. I did have 5 books in total, and I have read only the physical books, so only the 41 books, not graphic novel, not audiobooks, amounted to a total of 18,119 pages. Star-wise, I had 0 1 stars, good. I had 7 2 stars in the range of 2 stars, which means that can go from 2 stars to 2.75. So this is what I mean by range. 25 books were in the range of 3 stars, 23 books were in the range of 4 stars, 4 books were 5 stars. As if you know me, or if you don't, I'm gonna tell you, but basically for me it's really hard to give a book 5 stars. I always at the end of the year can count on the fingers of one hand how much 5 stars I've given in a year. This year is no different. It's 4. It's 4. So yeah, I'm also glad though that usually I get the majority of books are in the range of 3 stars, and although this year it's still the trend, I've almost basically read 4 stars as much as 3 stars. I will tell you at the end of the Oscars my ultimate favorite, or my ultimate favorite book, if you want. The genre that I read the most was fantasy, which I've read 28 of. Regarding gender, just considering the books and the audiobooks, I have read 1 from unknown, so I don't know if, because it was anonymous, and I don't know if it was a woman or a man, but I've read 28 male authors and 27 female authors, so pretty much equal, which is good. And I completed a total of 2 reading challenges. One was reading the 10 most disturbing mangas ever written. The other one was reading the highest rated books on Goodreads. So let's start with the Oscars. I'm gonna mix up favorite to most hated categories, so we're gonna get like a bit of both and it doesn't get tedious for one or the other. These are loosely based. So for best pictures, I chose the best book that's illustrated for me, and this year was without any doubt Frankenstein by Grace Grimley and Mary Shelley. Well, Mary Shelley wrote the text, Grace Grimley did the illustrations. This was my first time reading Frankenstein. The text is the original text, the letters are all original, so that's why I chose this format. Let me show you some other of his art. I admit it's probably not for everybody, however it was definitely for me, and I loved it. And by the way, I've loved both pictures and story. Best actress, I decided to interpret this as the best character, and in this case I would have to say that it's the protagonist of An Unkind of Magician. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is a urban fantasy that takes place in modern world where there is magician hidden between humans, and magicians are divided in houses, and these houses every amount of years battle each other to decide which is the winning house and the ruling house, more or less phases the synopsis. And you got our protagonist who basically, she's a mercenary hired by this other house, if I'm not mistaken, to combat in these magic trials and win the title for them, which is a possibility. And she's got an agenda of her own, and absolutely loved her. She was so powerful, and again, a complex character. So although I don't remember her first name because I suck and I've read these at the beginning of the year, I really, she stood out to me more than others. And I don't want to cheat, so I just chose one book for each category. There are other characters I really enjoyed this year, but she's the one who stuck with me the most, considering how long ago I read this book. Supporting actor. For this, I chose the best characters that were not necessarily the protagonists, and with these I will have to go with Every Heart Doorway, the twins, and all the other characters, apart from our main character, which I also really enjoyed, but the cast of characters around her and the twins that appear in the first installment of these series, which is a companion series, but it's kind of a recurring character series, so where you got each book there are the same characters, but each book is designed to be of one of the characters. So although these twins are the protagonists of the second book, Among the Sticks and Bones, something of the sort, which I did like less than the first book, I met them for the first time in Every Heart Doorway, which is a portal fantasy about these kids that go to fantasy worlds, come back to the real world, they cannot adapt, and all they want is going back to their fantasy world, but unfortunately unless a portal opens for them, they cannot. So there is this boarding school they can attend in the meantime to try to readjust or go back to their fantasy world. And in the first one there is a murder mystery, so I really loved the first book. And I really like the twins, which are these dark twins. One is very vain and mostly concentrated on being pretty and on going back to their world where she was kind of a princess of a sort. And then you got the other twins dressed as a boy, and she is really intelligent, smart, and she wants to be kind of a mad scientist, kind of a Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein vibe there. So I really love those. Let's do a worst actor, so worst character. And for this, I have to go with House of Leaves. Spoiler alert, didn't like the book. In this book where you follow different perspective and you follow basically different characters that witness and recount what happens to other characters in the book. So you got this family who enters this house just to find out that the house is bigger on the inside than the outside. So there are doors that open on this other house, which is really dark and scary. And then you got the writer who writes about this family and what happened to the family, and then you got this other male who finds the script of this guy who wrote about the family, and this guy I freaking hated. I didn't like the book at all in general. I've linked it up here and down below, the wrap up for that, where I basically kind of do a catch up of reading challenges before I start the reading year in 2021, and I explain a bit more details why I didn't like that. But definitely the protagonist, the one who talks about, the narrator who talks about the family, didn't like him at all. And I chose to go with worst actor because it was a protagonist and because I did an actress in the best. So although there is definitely female characters that I would strangle with my bare hands, I just wanted to be equal, if you want. Worst recommendation was probably Guilty Until Proven Innocent by John Robbins, a non-fiction about miscarriage of justice. This is featured in my wrap-up for the last wrap-up for 2020, so I'm not gonna give you any details. It's not necessarily the worst. The worst is featured in another category coming up later, but it's definitely the top two worst recommendation I got actually from a lecturer at my university, and it just didn't deliver as much as I was hoping to. Although it was a freestyle book, so I didn't hate it, all of it, but definitely it didn't deliver what was promised. Worst director, with this I interpret it as worst writer, and I have to go whoever wrote My Favorite Girlfriend Was a French Bulldog. This short story collection really didn't work for me. Didn't understand what she was talking about. At least I did listen to this on audiobook, so that might not have helped, but I didn't really like this. Boring. I didn't understand a word of what she was saying, so unfortunately this wasn't for me. The word for the most pointless, we'll have to go to Blood and Honey by Shelby Morin, second book in a YA series. In the first one, is a fantasy series where there is this witch hunter and a witch that gets married in the first book by a series of events. He doesn't know she's a witch and they hate each other, they hate their guts. I really liked the first book. With this book, we go nowhere. Literally, you start in a point, you come back to the same point by the end. Why? Didn't hate it. The writing was okay. Honestly, it was just kind of pointless. Best Redeemer. This is a Redeemer, so a series that I started didn't particularly like. I read the second one and really enjoyed, and this will have to go to actually a middle grade graphic novel called Kirsty Crumrin. I read the first one couple of years ago, didn't really like it. I think it was really childish, although I loved the drawings. The second one I loved the plot, loved the topics in it, love our protagonists. The drawings are always excellent, so it's definitely a middle grade series, but although I was really hesitant and it took me ages to pick up the second, it's redeemed in my eyes for now. And since I spoke just now of a graphic novel, let's do the category of best manga, and for these I'll have to award the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service by Eiji Otsuka and Hozui Yamazaki. This is a bind up of the first 3 volumes. This is featured in Reading the Most Disturbing Mangas Ever Written video, which is linked down below. This is the story of these boys and girls who attend university. They're really poor, try to get some money here and there, and because they have some supernatural ability, they have to deal with corpses. They decide to put together this delivery service for corpses. So basically, they go on the hunt for corpses that are left and they're not buried or they're hidden, so their family and their loved ones cannot grieve for them, and they basically try to give them back to their family. But because of their supernatural abilities, they end up being able to speak with the dead and to see what happens to them, and they try to basically resolve issues these corpses have going on before they can put to rest. Said like that, it doesn't sound much, but trust me, this was amazing. The discussions that are going on here and the element of supernatural in here is done in such a weird and yet interesting way. I really enjoy the art as well, don't get me wrong, but it's also what's the story itself, which is really interesting, because it's not the usual, oh, there is a corpse, I can speak with the corpse, I need to resolve the mystery of whoever killed this corpse. No, it's not like that, and that's why it surprised me so much. Sometimes it might be a mystery, but it's not always there. It's so much more, and it's so more broad and big than just that. That's just really interesting. And the ideas behind this, it's just, trust me, if you have to buy one manga next year and read it, try this. Although it's really difficult to get your hands on the omnibus editions or the volumes in general, trying to find the second omnibus, it's just impossible. Best international book, for these I will go with The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Although he lives in America and has been living in America, I think, the majority of his life. This author is actually from the Netherlands. This is also a book featured in my last wrap-up for the year, and in this, which is a non-fiction part of the Psychology Penguin series, the author explains trauma. It goes into details on what happens to the body and the brain as a result of trauma. It explains PTSD, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, whether you can link to past traumas or people that I've affected and they're in pain and they're just traumatized. And he explains in a scientific yet so digestible, understanding, lovely way what happens. And it's a book that teaches you so much about yourself, the people you love, and how to heal trauma and avoid trauma at the same time. An original story, a story that it's been heard so much and that I was just sick of it, and that has to be The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I freaking hated this. This is the story of this girl. She flees from an arranged marriage with a prince, and then the kingdom of the prince she has to marry, the king sends an assassin, and the prince also goes to look for her, and they found her and they disguise who they are from her. So there is a lot of triangle where she doesn't know who's the assassin and who's the prince. Boring, cringy, YA shit that we've read plenty of times. I'm sorry, I hated this book. I think it's one of the first books I've read this year, if I'm not mistaken, and just freaking hated it. Trope things after the other. And I'm not even that against love triangles at all. I was just, I don't know, this really didn't work. Worst expectation not met. I will have to go, unfortunately, with a really popular one, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I've listened to this on audio and I was expecting to absolutely love this. And although the writing was really lyrical and I enjoyed it, there was a lot of element of Christianity in this, which I'm not a really fan of. And I ended up, because it was again an audio, it's also partly fault of that. I didn't end up getting all the messages I think I was supposed to. I did not end up loving it as I was supposed to. It just fell in the meh categories, and yeah, unfortunately I had great expectations because of the hype and they were just not met. And the worst graphic novel, and graphic novel or manga and all that, we'll have to go to Alice in Sunderland. These, I was really excited when I got it, and then I noticed that it was a non-fiction recounting not the life of Lewis Carroll as much as the city that Lewis Carroll was born in or wrote Alice in Wonderland, and it was so freaking boring, like pages about the harbor and the history of a city who, unless you live there, you don't give a fuck about. So yeah, boring as shit, very expensive. I saw that, I believe, or I'm trying to say that, I don't remember. I just completely erased it from my mind because it was so freaking boring and long. Worst YA, because YA is a genre on its own, and I will have to go with Here There Are Monsters, another audiobook that I've listened to. It's about this girl, her sister goes missing, and it's kind of paranormal magical realism, and I think they attempt to do an unlikable main character, but it's a story that takes us nowhere. So it's a mystery where at the end we are exactly at the beginning and there is no resolution. The main character is not particularly interesting, although she's definitely unlikable, and there is nothing that particularly stood out to me about this book. So yeah, boring as fuck. So yeah, YA, definitely fail. Best adaptation for this, I've got two. One is a book, and I'll go with The Turn of a Key by Ruth Ware, a thriller based on The Turn of a Screw about this au pair. She goes to this house in the middle of nowhere. She accepts this job to care for these children while the parents are away, and then at the beginning of the book you find out that she is now in prison accused of having killed one of his children left in her care, and you have to find out why. I never read The Turn of a Screw, but I really like this, and I know that's an adaptation. Comic wise, I have to mention Snow, Glass and Apple. This is by Neil Gaiman. I loved this dark retelling of Snow White. Loved it from the story and to the drawing inside, the art style. Highly recommended. If you like the needle and the spindle and the needle, what was, you love this, get your hands on that. I just don't take my copy just because it's really high up, but I've got it and I love it. Original story, and for this I cannot not go with I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, which is now adapted on Netflix. Don't watch it. I mean, I didn't like it because I love the book and I think it's so different in the end. The end is so different that I didn't appreciate. I think Netflix makes it so easily understandable what's going on, while the book doesn't. Like, you get to the last page, and you're like very surprised. Like, I doubt like many can guess what was wrong or what was going on until that last bit. And I like that in the end you know what's going on, so it's resolved, but then the tension is kept and throughout the book, and it's a crazy story. It's simple and crazy at the same time. It's about this man who picks up his girlfriend to go on a trip to his parents' house in the outskirts of a city. And the girl, she is thinking about ending things, and she's trying to figure out how to tell him, basically. This is another thriller that really unsettled me. Worst standalone, we have to go to We Were Villains, and this is by ML Real. This is about this bunch of kids that are at theater school. One of them gets murdered, one of the others is accused of murder, and then we backtrack and find out what actually happens to them. And I don't know, this sounds like my jam, and instead I freaking hated it. I don't know if it was the writing, I don't find it interesting what was going on, I guessed what was going on, just nothing worked. So yeah, unfortunately, sorry. This is really, people either hate it or love it. I hated it, so yeah. Worst plot. With these, I'd say that I'll go with the most unsatisfying one, and I'll have to go, I'm really sorry because this is really popular, but I'll have to go with The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. All this series has kind of struggled through, but because of writing I kept going, and then the last one happened and nothing happens basically, and I think this plot goes nowhere. And unless you really are there just for the writing, which probably you love it, then unless you're there for that, then there is not much to it, to a mystery and to whatever happens. Best couple, will have to go to the book The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm gonna tell. It's the final one that I wish was a bit different, but it's a final, the last chapter one couple, and that's all I'm gonna say. This is about Eddie LaRue. She makes a deal with the devil, and she's gonna live forever, and she's gonna be saved from marrying a really boring guy and having a really boring life. But turns out that in exchange for that, no one will ever remember Addie as soon as she leaves the room. She lives through centuries being forgotten by everybody, even her family. And then one day she gets into this bookshop, and this guy remembers her next time he sees her. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Best fiction, I have to go with The Way of Kings. Really slow in the beginning, but then it's just the end, man. I rarely got so excited to finish a book as I got toward the end of this book. I'm really glad that I'm on for the journey, and I cannot wait to read more. So yeah, best fiction quality wise, and the plot and how it's crafted, we'll have to go to Brandon Sanderson and The Way of Kings. Special Achievement Award, we'll have to go to The Book Thief by Mark Zuzak. I usually hate books on World War II. I've read a couple of his year, which I really enjoyed both, but Mark Zuzak with The Book Thief got a 5 stars, and I guess because both books told us about, yes, World War II, but with a background and about characters that are not necessarily obvious, and the writing and the message of Mark Zuzak of The Book Thief, I guess why, now I know why it's so much beloved by everybody. I get it, it was a 5 stars for me. Definitely a worth read. And best non-fiction, we'll have to go to Talking with Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. Love this to pieces. This is another Psychology by Penguin series book in which Gladwell explains to us why we are so bad at reading strangers, and using real cases from miscarriage of justice to spy cases that broke the news, and very interesting real life examples. He explains to us why we are bad at reading strangers and why it's important that we stay that way, and what happens when someone is actually particularly good at reading strangers and the consequences of that. So he takes both sides of a coin and explores in a really digestible, in a really easy way, interesting, fast-paced way, all those kind of topics. So freaking interesting. Definitely best non-fiction. Honorable mention, which is an award that I want to give to The Southern Guide to Slaying Vampires, and reason being is that this takes the vampire trope, puts it in a setting as Murder, She Wrote, I'd say, if I have to describe it in some way, and takes the vampire creature and turns it on its head and makes it really interesting. Although it's a book that has definitely flaws, and I've wrapped this up in my wrap up of October, where I recommend things for Halloween, I still have to recognize how unique for the January it was, and it's definitely a small gem that I will treasure in the future and I will recommend. And the last 2 categories actually in the worst part of the Oscars, which is most boring, which we'll have to give to The Secret Barrister. Very freaking boring, unfortunately. Yeah, I didn't like it. Another suggested by my lecturer, and this is about this anonymous barrister who recounts why the law doesn't work as supposed to, and I could have learned so much, and instead I didn't. It was just freaking boring, badly written in my opinion, and he chose to describe some cases of defense that I was really not happy about. And worst sequel, I will have to say that the worst sequel is probably Tunnel of Bones by V. Schwab. So she's featured 2 times in these both sides. Well, while Blood and Honey, which I mentioned also in the worst, is pointless, it's true, I have to say that Tunnel of Bones I really didn't like, while Blood and Honey fell just flat. Tiny Bones is a middle grade series by V.E. Schwab, in which she has this protagonist seeing ghosts after she has a near-death experience. And the second one I didn't like. I liked the atmosphere, but I didn't like the plot. It was really childish, while the first one was more interesting. And it was just overall really boring. I didn't like it. I barely gave it 3 stars. I might continue with the series, but who knows. Anyway, if I have to choose at the end of all of these, top book for the year, fiction is definitely Way of Kings, and non-fiction is definitely Talking with Strangers. I was really debating between these and The Body Keeps the Score, but I think I read this more quickly. It's just between the two, the other is more scientific, while this is highly entertaining at the end of the day. And the worst book, I've already mentioned my favorite girlfriend is a French Bulldog and Kiss of Deception, which I definitely hated, but I'd have to say it probably is House of Leaves by whatever it's called, this guy. I'm not gonna go into a rant in here, but I freaking hate that book, and I know that plenty of people love it, so I thought, yeah, let's go with the most controversial one. Didn't really like this. It's 700 of painful experience. We do get really interesting bits about the family when the family is inside the house and exploring this other house. All the rest is shit. It's full of info-dumpy notions. It's written in a format that I freaking hated it. It's confusing. It's full of hidden messages, apparently, that the author never comes out and says, well, yes, you're right, your theory is correct, and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, there is a cult behind this book that you don't get, and I freaking hated it. So, yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments down below your Oscars, some of these categories, which would you put personally? I'd love to hear, and maybe get some recommendation out of those. Take care. I'll see you next time. Ciao!